The story happened a couple of years ago after a breakup. I had a little time to myself and I just wanted to meet new people. Not necessarily to hook up, but just go on dates. Here enters JB. Seems nice enough, and we met at the nearest city. We had a pretty good date and I say goodbye. We make some more arrangements to hang out and eventually we end up back at his flat in an area of a city that I knew quite well, as I lived there as a student. So I felt pretty confident and comfortable that his flatmates would also be home, and that I wouldn't be completely alone with them. We're sitting downstairs watching The Office when his flatmates come home, and they're making their meals, and then he suggested finishing watching an episode upstairs before I left for the bus. Well, he has the smallest room with a single bed and no chairs. He lays down on the bed and I sit on the end of it. He encourages me to move up and I awkwardly do just that. He says that he can't see, so to lie down. So I lie down on the bed pretty uncomfortably, but try to think logically. And we hadn't even kissed yet, so what could really happen? Right at that moment, I really wish that I had just left. Without even a cuddle or anything, the guy just grabs my arm and then tries to shove my hand down his shorts. Nope. Luckily for me, I was kind of clutching my handbag pretty close-ish, and I just flipped out of the bed into a standing position, threw my bag over me, and then ran downstairs, with him saying,
"Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Please don't leave."
He had no shoes on and he didn't know that I used to live in the city. I was so out of there and down a different street that we had come down earlier. I was totally freaking out at the bus stop and on the phone trying to get a lift home before he finds me. I finally make it home and no, I never see him again. I never saw him again, but make no mistake, that wasn't the last time I heard from him. He went mighty quiet after I ignored his messages begging for me to meet up with him again. I spied on his Facebook when he did go quiet, just a little curious. And he had just moved in with a girlfriend. This was mere weeks after the event. Who moves in with someone that quick? Or maybe he was already seeing her. I guess I'll never really know. Cue about 6 months and nothing. I hadn't been on Plenty of Fish for a while after that. And then in January, I get a message from him. He split with his girlfriend and he just wants to meet, chat, and have a coffee with me. Being a little bit lonely, I kinda thought about it. I agreed, but I said that we could only meet in public. He agrees. We make plans on that evening and I'm leaving work and he says that he can't make it and that I should just meet him at his place. Nope. I decline and I go straight home. This goes on for a further 6 months and him badgering and guilting me into saying that I'd meet him at a coffee place and then him changing the plans last minute, then me canceling. This probably sounds like nothing until about June, when I'd been messaging my friend who had lived the next town over. Let's call my friend M. M had a really psycho ex-girlfriend that he had told me all about, and M had a very normal name, but it was spelled pretty unusual, at least to me anyway. So one evening I'm chilling at home and I get a WhatsApp from a number that I don't recognize, and it's mentioned M and the way that his name is spelled. I obviously freak out and I then tell M that I think his crazy ex had sent me a message. Unfortunately, I've totally forgotten what the threatening message actually was, just that I was really freaked enough to ask who it was, and I then get a message back.
"You know. M knows."
So M freaks out and I keep getting calls from this number into the early hours and the caller kept hanging up whenever I answered. I suffered from anxiety at the time and the next morning I was a total wreck. I went to work and got another slew of random calls. Later that night, I decided to tell my cousin everything that happened and she called from her phone. Guess whose voicemail she got? Yes, JB. She leaves him a message saying to not contact me ever again or else the police will be involved. I check his Facebook a little while later and he's apparently moving back to his home country. Hopefully I'll never meet him again. This probably wasn't the most scary or creepy encounter, but it was really playing on my mind and it really creeped me out. So to start, I'm a transgender woman. I'm single, and I make my status as trans very clear on all of my dating profiles, except for Plenty of Fish, because they consider that to be talking about sex and they will straight up ban you. So I stated instead that I'm a huge proponent of trans rights. So this guy messages me and he lives about an hour away. Kinda cute in a mildly creepy way. Like something seems a little off about him, but you know, people can't help how they look. So I decide to give him a chance. I discovered that he's a smoker, but he said that he's trying really hard to quit and he really only does it when he's really stressed or upset. We have a pretty nice conversation and he finally asks me for my number. And without even thinking about it, I give him the number but tell him that I'm getting ready for my evening classes, so I'll probably be slow on responding. A couple of minutes go by and I get a message.
Hi, it's so-and-so from Plenty of Fish.
Now, usually I send a standard quick message, something along the lines of, "Hey, it's Allie, so just to be clear, since my profile might be a little vague, I'm a transgender woman. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, so if you're not interested, I completely understand." About 20% of the time, the guy isn't interested and gets really rude and he needs to be blocked. The other 80% is usually split between immediate inappropriate questions and dick pics, as well as casual acceptance or dead silence. But like I said, I was getting ready to go to class, so I hadn't sent the message yet. A couple of minutes go by and I'm about to text him my standard message when I get another text.
Who the hell is this and why is he paying your cell phone bill?
Where did you get that name?
Answer the question. Who is he?
I'm honestly pretty stunned at this point, and I realize that he must have paid one of those shady websites that offered personal info for a fee. Well, if you absolutely must know, I'm transgender, and that used to be my name. I was about to tell you when you pulled that stunt. Please do us both a favor and lose my number. That's incredibly invasive, and I really don't want to talk to you anymore.
Do you still live at the same address? I'm going to come see you so that we can talk about this in person.
No, I moved a few months ago, and I'm getting ready to head out like I said. You really need to leave me alone. Don't contact me again.
Well, since you have something to hide, I'm going to run a full background check on you. You lied to me, and I really don't appreciate that.
You know, I'm going to be sending screenshots of this conversation, your Plenty of Fish profile, and all of your photos to my two best friends who work in law enforcement in your town, as well as my ex-boyfriend who I'm still on good terms with who also works for the local sheriff's office. I'm not kidding. Don't text me again. I didn't really hear anything else from him for a couple of weeks. I made sure that my doors and windows were always locked, and the aforementioned friends and ex would always check up on me from time to time. Eventually, it just became one of those weird things that just makes you laugh, but uneasily. And then one day, I could have sworn that I saw him at my local grocery store. Same dark hair, thick glasses frames, and just this creepy guy staring at me. Literally just watching me as I shopped. I decided to text my ex about it, and as an upswing on things, my ex and I got back together in a casual sort of way, and he actually stayed the night a couple of times a month off and on. One night when I was alone though, I just kept getting this really weird feeling and smelling smoke. I lived in a little apartment complex that were 3 separate apartments that shared walls, but no plumbing or air ducts. I don't smoke and I'm very sensitive to the smell thanks to my asthma. The apartment had a wall unit AC, so I decided to turn it off since it was apparently pulling air in from a neighbor's guest who must have been chain smoking, I thought. I had an ASL video that was due the next morning, so I was up all night practicing and recording the video, signing the same story over and over again until it was almost a dance rather than a narration. A couple of times I actually had to restart the video because my cat was going absolutely nuts. Finally, around 7 a.m., I had the video finished and sent it in, and I was finally ready for bed. I decided to double check that all of the doors and windows were locked and then set an alarm and finally went to sleep. I woke up and got ready for school and was running a bit late and had to hurry out the door. But I noticed something weird but didn't have time to stop and register it. Classes went pretty smoothly. I got an A on my ASL video, and I decided to stop for groceries on my way home from class. As I got home, I then saw what had been bugging me. Each apartment had a really small garden on each side of the porch. Mine was really nothing but gravel and pavers that the previous tenant had put in, but it was pretty tidy. That is, except for a pile of cigarette butts that looked like someone had dumped their car ashtray right into my garden. There was no other trash, just that pile, right in front of my bedroom window. I didn't really think anything about it at first and just get a broom and dustpan to sweep it up. As I'm doing this, my neighbor, who's an old man, comes out and he asks me if my boyfriend was ever able to get a hold of me. I ask him what he means, and he tells me that there was a young man that was waiting for me on my front porch off and on for a few hours last night, and he'd seen the guy around a few times and thought he was my boyfriend. I asked him what he looked like. Dark hair, thick glasses, chain smoking. I text the on-again, off-again ex, cops take statements, and I give them the screenshots. I moved out of state a few weeks later for unrelated reasons, and I've legally changed my name since this happened, with closed records. I don't give guys my number anymore. To anyone out there that might be experiencing something similar, use a texting app until you can really get to know someone, because for only about $5, creeps can get literally everything from your phone number. Be safe out there. A little while back, I decided that I needed to get back out there and start trying to meet new people. Not necessarily actively looking for a relationship, but meeting people at the bars just wasn't really working for me. So, as most single college girls, I downloaded a dating app. I met a lot of people and talked to them online, and it gave me the confidence to try and actually go out on a date every now and then. I didn't meet up with many of these guys in person, but there were a few. Most didn't really lead to a second date, but there was one that was actually worse than the rest. I met this guy named Alex, and we made plans to go out to dinner. He said that he wanted to take me to this really nice restaurant in the town between us, but when the day came, he never answered his phone. The next day, he contacts me with his story about getting stuck at work and forgetting his phone at home. Whatever, excuses. I wasn't really buying it, but he asked to reschedule. Stupidly enough, I said yes. So the day comes and he tells me to meet him at his house and he'll drive us to the restaurant that he made the reservations at. He said to come hungry like 3 times and kept reminding me not to eat beforehand. I guess this place has big plates or something. Now, I don't really like meeting people for the first time at their home or getting into their car, but we had been talking for over a week, so I just figured, what the hell. But when I got close, he calls me and tells me to park in the parking lot down the road. Weird, but okay. Small driveway, I guess. Trouble is, I never actually told him what kind of car I drove, but he pulled into the parking lot right behind me, and then he sent me a text saying that he was parked 2 spots down. Red flag number 1. So I get in his car against my better judgment, and we start heading for the restaurant. Now, I didn't really know where we were exactly. I'm not really that familiar with the town, but I know the restaurant that we're heading to, and it shouldn't have been more than like 10 minutes away on a major highway. But almost 25 minutes later, we're driving some dark back road. So I looked at him and then I say, "Hey, where the hell are we going anyway?" He proceeded to tell me that he hadn't told me the full story. Apparently when he called to make the reservations, it took 3 times of calling before they actually answered. And when someone finally did answer, they told him they had moved locations, and then given him a description of where they were now located. My stomach dropped when I realized that we had passed that intersection probably about 5 minutes before this point, and I realized that he didn't have an address punched into his GPS, even though the GPS was running. Red flag number 2. So I pulled up my GPS, punched in the name of the restaurant, and it said the business was closed for the day. Red flag number 3. At this point, yes, I know I was being stupid, but I decided to stay and we hung out and talked and got to know each other. Still, the way he went about things was kind of creepy, and when he couldn't find the restaurant, he just kind of said,
"Don't worry, I know another place we can go,"
and drove farther into the darkness, eventually pulling over to a trail in the woods and told me that we had to walk the rest of the way. He said we were going stargazing. The spot was beautiful and all, but the whole way through the woods to the clearing, he just kept cracking jokes about how he swore he wasn't a killer or something, and telling me to promise that I wasn't going to steal his keys and take the car and leave him there. Red flag number 4. I'm not really sure how to explain this, but through half the night, he just kept lying to me. He would tell me these big, elaborate, detailed stories and then suddenly end it with,
"Just kidding, that never actually happened."
I mean, it was pretty funny the first time when he tried to convince me that he got so drunk one night that he got his penis pierced. But after hours of this crap, I realized that he had been just kidding about almost everything that he said. I realized that I didn't even really know anything true about this guy. Red flag number 5. Yes, I know. I'm an idiot. We were talking about going to watch a movie at his house. He was all for it and then apparently changed his mind and pulled the car over in front of a park suddenly on the way back. He said that he'd rather just stay there. He kept trying to dare me to run naked through the park and asking me weird sexual personal questions. He suddenly demanded to know if I was going to kiss him or not before the night was over, and he said that he wanted to put on chapstick first. I kid you not. This guy literally made me dig through my purse looking for chapstick while he sat in the driver's seat making a big show of licking his lips and trying to subtly rub his dick through his pants. I told him that I didn't have any chapstick, so he said that was fine, but
"Why don't you crawl on over here and show me what you got?"
I told him that I didn't really think I was comfortable with that, and then he proceeded to reach around me and try and drag me into his lap, using my butt as leverage. I told him again that I had no intention of sleeping with him or anyone on a first date, and again he said that it was fine, but
"How about a little 2-minute preview?"
Final red flag. Sirens are totally going off in my head now. I got pretty mad at this point. Keep in mind, this was after he had spent literally days telling me how much he hates men who try to force themselves upon women, and how he doesn't understand how anyone could do that, let alone get pleasure from it. This after he said that he didn't want to sit too close to me while we were stargazing so that he didn't make me uncomfortable. It was literally like a switch had flipped. I told him that trying to force me wasn't going to make me any more likely to agree, and that I thought he was supposed to be a gentleman like he had claimed. This guy actually told me that he thought I was just scared of how big it was, and that if I didn't want to suck it, there were other options. I told him again that it wasn't going to happen, and he actually pouted about it. I was literally racking my brain trying to think of an excuse to get him to drive me back to my car when he pulled out his phone, opened a text message thread, and then looks at me and says that he got a text from his uncle, saying that something had happened at the house and that he needed to get home ASAP. I mean, I'm done at this point regardless, but I really hate being lied to. I mean, if you weren't having a good time with me, you could have just asked to call it a night. Why lie? Why make up false intentions and then deliberately act the exact opposite way of what you just said? I mean, just why? To make things worse, he dropped me off at my car in the dark parking lot at midnight, and then just drove off before I'd even walked to my car. Obviously, there wasn't going to be a second date. But the kicker? I drove by the old location of the restaurant a few days ago. It never moved. I mean, it's still open and right on the highway, and his house is literally about 2 minutes down the road. So where the hell was he taking me? So creepy guy Alex from Bumble, you really suck. Back in 2015, when I was about 20 years old, I was using Tinder a lot. Sometimes I would go out with a girl and we wouldn't connect, or I'd get stood up. I went to meet up with some friends from IU in Bloomington for a weekend of just hanging out and enjoyment, and I figured that I might meet a nice girl and hang out and get to know her. I don't remember the girl's name particularly, but we matched and we had talked for about a day, and we decided to hang out at her apartment later that evening. I told my friends that I was going to go out and that the apartment was only about 5 minutes away from their place. I got in my car and put on my GPS, and I made it to the apartment in a few minutes, texting her and asking which apartment door was hers. I walked around the open complex searching for the right numbers until I got to her building. I texted her to meet me at the door to let me in because I was pretty sure that I was at the right building. She said okay, and I just stood outside waiting for about 5 minutes. Well, let me just also add that it's also about 10 o'clock in the winter. I began to notice something as I looked up at my phone. I noticed a window with blinds from the bottom floor open up, with what I could assume was about 4 different people just staring at me. I texted this girl asking where she was, and she told me the door to her building was open, and that her apartment was the first on the right. I walked to the door and I was really surprised that it was unlocked. As soon as the door to the complex was shut, I turned to the left and I heard someone from behind the door then say,
"Shh, he's outside the door."
That's when I realized that the door that I was at was the same one with the people staring at the window at me, and I got a gut reaction that I really needed to leave or something was going to happen to me. I walked out of the complex and went by the window, which I noticed the lights had been shut off, and then I ran to my car and got out of there as fast as I could. As I got back to my friend's place, I explained to them the situation, and they didn't really take it as serious as I did. As the night went on, we had a few beers, and before I went to bed, I actually got a text that said,
"Where did you go? I've been waiting for you all night."
I blocked the number and went to sleep. So if you're ever on a dating site, always agree to meet in public. This all happened when I was 19 years old. I'm not the best looking dude, so I've never really had much luck with women, and I ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck on there either until like the 3rd month of using it, when a blonde woman named Katie then messaged me. She was pretty enough that I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until about 3 days later that she messaged me again, which was really odd because bots almost never message me more than once. I clicked on her chat and then replied, then looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We had been talking for like a month when she proposed the idea that I come see her. I was pretty reluctant as she lived nearly 8 hours away from me by car, but I had to admit I really did like her quite a bit, and I'd actually been thinking for a while now about asking if I could go see her. After a bit more badgering from her, I finally said that I would take the drive to go see her. At this point, I really had no reason to doubt she was who she said she was. We had video chatted about every other week and called most days. I just assumed that I got really lucky. Things did get a little weird though on the way there. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was and making sure that I was still coming. At some points, whenever I took more than 30 minutes to respond, she would send me a slew of annoyed texts. Admittedly, I had chalked this up to her being nervous about me coming to see her. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't really blame her. I had a really hard time finding the house at first. The directions that she gave me were pretty confusing, and it was back through a series of gravel and dirt roads and a large thicket of trees. It was still about midday when I came into an old-looking house. A window on the 2nd floor was all boarded up, but it didn't really look abandoned, just worse for wear. Katie's red buggy that she would always talk about was parked right in front of the garage. I took out my phone and texted her that I was here, and she only sent me a smiley face in return. When I got out of my car to go knock on the door, I noticed someone was looking at me from one of the 2nd floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that he comes to stay with her every now and again, so I just ignored it and knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and even gave me a kiss, which really surprised me, and I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about her plans when I asked her about her dad. "So, you didn't tell me your dad was here. Was that going to be a surprise or?" I said. Katie looked really confused and she told me that her dad wasn't there. I thought that she was keeping up the act, and I told her that she didn't have to keep pretending, and that I'd seen him looking at me through the upstairs window. Katie went pale, and she said that we had to get out of that house right now. We both ran out to our cars, and when I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad wasn't there and that she had been home alone until I showed up. I called the police, and while I was on the phone giving the address, Katie then gasped and she pointed to the window where I had seen the guy last. He was now looking at us from out the window again. I got a better look at him and he seemed a bit older and frail, almost like he hadn't eaten anything in a really long time. He then left the window after he saw that we saw him. The police took about a half an hour to show up, and the whole time Katie was crying. She was also mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping her doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions, and the other two searched the house. They came back out a little while later, and they told me and Katie that while they didn't find anyone, they did find out that the back door was hanging open. Whoever it was had run out into the woods, and the cops were pretty sure the house was empty. After the cops left, Katie asked me to stay the night because she was too scared to be in her house alone. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bedroom was right next to the one that the man had been in. Katie had also brought out the shotgun that her father had given her, but she never used. I told her it was fine. The man's gone, but she insisted, saying she'd feel safer if we had it out. I'm really glad she did. Later that night, I was still wide awake, watching TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. Right from the kitchen, I then heard the sound of a doorknob being turned. At this point, I wasn't even scared, I was just pissed. I flipped on the light in the kitchen, pointed the gun at the kitchen door, and there he was. The very same guy that had been in the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm really glad we had locked the door. The man unfroze and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and I told her what happened, and we called the police yet again. When they arrived, they did a sweep of the woods and found no one yet again. They told me and Katie that it'd probably be a good idea to stay somewhere else for the night. Me and Katie said our goodbyes. She was going to go stay at her friend's house and I was going to go home. I left a little bit after Katie did. I was on the phone with my brother telling him what happened. My headlights were on. As I was talking on the phone, something caught my eye. That same freaking man was standing at the corner of the house just watching me. I immediately gunned it out of there and I didn't even bother calling the police again. But I did text Katie about it, and she said that she was going to call them again. I don't think that Katie ever even went back to that house alone ever again. And I really can't say that I blame her for that. So yeah, that was definitely one of the scariest nights of my life. This happened in 2011. I had just gotten out of a really rough relationship a few months prior to this happening. My friends had encouraged me to try dating again, so I caved and I then made a profile on Plenty of Fish. I was really surprised with how many messages I'd received within the first few hours. Most were just people saying hi or asking to hook up. I wasn't really looking for a hookup, so I ignored those. After about a week, a guy roughly about an hour away from me sent me a message. He was cute, so I decided to message him back. The conversation was pretty casual at first. He asked me if I'd like to go out for coffee sometime. Not really thinking anything of it, I said sure. This is where it started to get weird. He started to get really pushy and asked when we could grab the coffee. I told him that I didn't have my own car, so I'd have to borrow my mom's car to meet up with him. He offered to come pick me up, but I wasn't really comfortable with that idea. The next message made my blood run cold. It read,
I'm sure your hometown isn't that big. If I knocked on a few doors, someone would be able to tell me where you lived.
"Are you crazy?" I replied, "I'm sorry, but that's kinda creepy." This just really pissed him off. He messaged me multiple times after this. They said,
You know that I can make you disappear and no one would ever look for you. You're nothing but a slut. I could throw you down a well and no one would ever find you.
I was really scared at this point, so I asked him to just please leave me alone. He then replied with,
I know where your hometown is. It's not a big town. I can find you.
At this point, I'd really had enough and I blocked him. I reported his account to Plenty of Fish and deleted my account. I was really on edge for the next few weeks after that happened. I was honestly afraid that he was actually going to come look for me. So did the really creepy guy who threatened me on Plenty of Fish. Stay the hell away from me. Last month, I moved to another country where I didn't really know almost anyone. Due to that, I had spent a lot of time alone and started to get really bored. Although I didn't really like the concept of Tinder, I decided to create an account to meet new people, and I spent hours swiping left and right and having brief conversations with my matches. However, most of them were men that wanted to see me on the same day, which kind of scared me a bit. Our story begins when I matched with a 30-year-old girl who didn't wait too long to send me a hi nor ask me for my number. I, who had never used the app before, thought that was pretty normal, and I gave my phone number to her without having spoken to her at all. And that was my first mistake. At first, everything seemed pretty normal to me. The girl, which name was Diana, sent me voice notes, and we had talked briefly and in superficial ways about ourselves. She seemed very, very interested in talking to me, since on several occasions she would double text me whenever I didn't answer quickly. And I'm not going to lie, I found that curious. However, I didn't really pay any attention to it. The second day of talking to her, she asked me to meet her somewhere, and even though our conversations had been pretty superficial, I said yes, and we then set a place and time. But hours before our meeting, I then regretted it, deleted Tinder, and then sent her a message apologizing. That was where things got really weird. She texted me that it was fine, but then a few minutes later, she sent me several messages, then deleted them within a second so that I couldn't read them. Then a couple of hours later, she tried to video call me. I didn't answer, and I told her I was busy. And despite that, she called me anyways yet again, and again. I kept telling her that I was busy, but still, she called me twice at like 2 a.m., and by that time I was out drunk and I blocked her. I felt a little bad about it, but I mean, come on. I'm a woman in her early 20s living in a foreign country, so at the same time, I felt pretty relieved that it was over. Except it wasn't. I woke up to a hello from an unknown number, which profile picture in WhatsApp was of an old man. I asked him who it was, and in less than a minute, I then received an answer. It said, "Hi, it's Diana. This is my dad's number. Why did you block me? Did I annoy you?" Even in spite of how bizarre that was, I tried to empathize with her, and I then answered with the truth. And again, she told me that it was fine, and then I blocked the number. In less than 2 hours, I received another message from yet again another unknown number. It said, "Hi, it's Diana. Why do you keep blocking me? I need to talk to you. Text me." At this point, I really no longer find it funny. I tell her that I'm no longer interested in talking to her, and she literally tells me, "But I need to tell you something. There's this girl who's been harassing me. She does black magic." I repeat that I'm not interested, and then she says, "You don't believe me, do you?" And then I finally blocked her again for the third time. Anyway, I don't really know if this was just some kind of strange joke, but I think that I can say my first experience using Tinder was pretty tragic. I wonder if it's always like this though, because I've been thinking about downloading it again and giving it a try. At least I now know that next time I shouldn't share my phone number with someone I haven't talked to. Let's just hope for the best. And Diana, please don't text me or contact me ever again. Please.